Hi, and welcome to the Invigor Medical Podcast, where we're going to walk with you on your journey toward optimal health, performance, and well-being. My name is Natalie.
And I'm Derek.
And we're going to be your hosts on this journey. In each episode, we share insights from top professionals in physical, mental, and emotional health. With that said, let's dive into today's podcast. Today on our show, we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Dana Sinclair, a renowned performance psychologist and the author of the compelling new book, Dialed In, Do Your Best When It Matters Most. With a career dedicated to coaching the elite across sports, medicine, and business, Dr. Sinclair shares her proven plan for excellence under pressure. I am so excited for this topic.
I'm super stoked.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Sinclair. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I am too. It sounds like Derek's already listened a bit to some of your content. And I told Derek before we started, I've been a little under the weather and I feel like my brain isn't firing on all cylinders quite this morning. So I'm like, I might lean on you a little bit more for some of these. If you see me kind of just staring into the distance, it's not because I'm trying to gather a thought, it's because I'm trying to find one. So just know that'll be the signal. No.
Sounds good.
No, I think there's going to be a lot to talk about here, and it is something that I'm excited. I think anybody who is into their health and wellness is probably to a degree, at least some level, into their performance ability and capability and really tapping into the highest level that they possibly can. And so I'm excited for us to be able to dive into all of the knowledge and expertise that you have and some of the key points of your book. But could we start with, I always like to know a little bit about you as our guest, and how did you get here, and what is your background that led you to writing a book like this?
Well, I will make a very circuitous route to this point in my life short. So I got involved really because I started playing sport when I was young. I played on a national team in Canada.
Oh, wow.
So playing internationally, the higher the level, the more fun and exciting it was. So I always liked the performing in that zone, not in other zones, but in that zone. And then I just kind of kept going to school in psychology. I ended up there. I don't have a very direct path at all, and ended up getting a PhD in sports psychology because I thought it was interesting, and then realized, oh, that's not going to get me what I want. Teaching at a university is great, but I would like to do something else. So I had to get registered as a psychologist. So I did another PhD.
Wow.
And,
No big deal. Just another PhD for the wall.
Well, it was one of those things that just kind of worked out. And I started working in the hospitals, actually, in reproductive psychiatry. So I started there.
Interesting.
I know. Loved it. Researched, did private practice, but then realized I kind of joined my husband in the business, and I did the sport performance side, because that was really fun.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Can I ask what sport you played?
Field hockey.
Field hockey.
Fun.
Okay, that's not one you hear a ton about.
No, I know.
There's
and
a
then I
lot on the
played
East
ice
Coast.
hockey in Cambridge.
Ice hockey too, yeah. And so you mentioned your husband, you said joining forces, so is he also a doctor?
No, he's not.
Oh,
He's
okay.
a
Say that one more time, I didn't hear that.
consultant. He's a management consultant.
Okay, amazing. So you took kind of your passion and your love in the sport that you were doing, and then you're like, okay, let's just kind of get this degree and see what we can marry. And then reproductive psychology is what you said?
Reproductive psychiatry, which is when you think of infertility, postpartum depression, things like that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's very fascinating. So, did you find any connection? This is somewhat of a tangent from your book Dialed In, but did you find any connections between reproductive psychiatry and sports psychology?
Absolutely. We are all performers no matter what we're trying to do. And, we all want results. We all want to be good at what we do and feel satisfaction. And it's sometimes not that easy to get to your best in your pressure moments. So we're all trying to perform in our daily lives or in work under pressure. That's what I deal with in my private practice. It's those pressure moments when they're meaningful.
Yeah. No, I just have Queens Under Pressure going through my head.
Same. Oh my gosh. Literally playing in my head right now.
I like that.
That's great. So really, I mean, this that all ties into your book Dialed In. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, the premise of it, and then we can kind of start diving into some of the specifics.
Of course. So the premise of it is really, after all these years doing what I've been doing, there's a process that helps people get to their best and succeed well. And that's a lot easier than people think. So I really wanted to show people how to do this, or what I'd learned in my practice with Olympians and business executives. What do the best do? How do they do it? Here you go. We can all do it. We can all take parts of it, apply it to our own lives, and be better, and be more satisfied. And it's one way to nourish your mental health too. If you are performing well and feeling satisfied, it's a pretty great feeling.
Yeah.
That is really such a good point, because I think sometimes it's easy to just really be focused on the goal and the performance and not really see how hand in hand it goes with your overall sense of well-being. I think we're like a very highly performative society, but I think we're also really in the trenches when it comes to mental health.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting correlation to talk about. I mean, what is your experience in that sense of like, the chicken or the egg, which came first, like focusing. I was just thinking about, let me try to connect these thoughts. I was thinking about, as you were talking, the idea of mind over matter and how much of a role that plays here. But then when it comes to our mental health, how often it's brushed under the rug, right? And then it's like just push forward, and that doesn't really help anything either. So I'm kind of seeing this imbalance, or I don't know what the right word would be, where it's just like all about performance, focused on performance, but also like the effect it has on mental health, and making sure that we're nurturing it, bringing it alongside instead of just sweeping it away by pushing through. Is this making sense?
I don't know if this is is right in line with what you're saying, but I think that it is connected. I don't know. Adam Grant recently talked about this in a podcast interview with Andrew Huberman, coming out early with Mr. Huberman.
We always see how long it takes for he mentions Huberman.
So it wasn't him, and I would have to go back and look at who Adam Grant was actually quoting. But he talked about this idea of languishing. I don't know if you've heard of this idea of languishing, where it's really like, I know I could be doing better, but I'm not, and so it's like there's this gap of like, man, I know that I'm not doing bad, but I'm also not doing my best. And there's like this really deep sense of like, man, I wish I could actually get that. I don't know if that connects into your idea as well.
Yeah, I think it does a little bit. I think it's that sense. I don't know. I think maybe the thought I'm trying to connect is, again, that performative society, that push, perform, and kind of ignore any sort of negative mental health effects, right? And so that would be an unhealthy side of this, and dialing in and doing your best. And maybe the healthy side would be like being performative and pushing hard and being dialed in, but bringing along the mental health with it, and recognizing that they're two things that go hand in hand, if that makes sense.
They do go hand in hand, and that speaks, I think, to the argument, about talent. Talent is the one thing that's going to ensure success, and you've got to push and work hard and all of that. And there's a lot of myths, I think, involved in what it takes to perform successfully. And I'm always saying that talent doesn't ensure success. It's your mindset. If your mind is cluttered, turbulent, if you're overthinking, if you're negative, it's very difficult to stay focused in the moment when you need to get something done and actually perform well. That's pretty frustrating.
Oh my gosh. I can relate to this so much right now. So this is like really timely. I mean, part of it is like, it's February and it's winter time, and I have to remind myself every year this time of year, like, it's winter time. As soon as the sun comes out, you're going to feel better. Like, I remind myself of that. But at the same time, this is where I'm at. It's winter time. It's tough. I'm struggling. And, all of the things going on in my life, both personally and professionally, I feel this sense of overwhelm and this mind clutter and mind fog. And so in a really real way, I feel myself, it feels like I'm just trudging through sludge and slop right now. Like, I feel like I can't get any momentum going. I feel like as soon as I kind of start to, there's a hiccup. Like, I get sick, a kid gets sick, there's a Monday holiday, so I'm not in the office, and I feel like I can't get going. Do you know what I mean? And so I am super excited to hear you talk about how to get dialed in and how to really nurture ourselves when we're in these spaces so that we can perform, because life happens. It's always happening. Even if you don't have something directly going on in your life, probably someone you care about does, or something crazy gets dropped in your lap. Like Derek's got something going on in his life that's just like dropped in his lap, big deal, that he's got to figure out as well. And life goes on, and you have You still have to perform at work, and you still
gotta
have to like get up and go to the gym and feed yourself good food and feed your kids good food, which we've been having a lot of takeout lately in my house, and which just makes us feel worse.
Yeah.
Right? You know? So let's dive into the book. Please God, Dr. Sinclair, Dana, let's dive in and tell us, how do we start to become dialed in so that we can perform at our best?
Well, first of all, I do think that, well, one, what you said about there's always something happening in life for sure. And I think the idea of everything's supposed to be perfect and then I can really get going if everything's in line and all that, I don't know that that's really realistic. So this idea of I've got to be flawless, I've got to not make mistakes, it's got to go like this, otherwise I'm going to disappoint myself, I'm going to disappoint others, I'm not good enough, all of this I think has to go.
Perfect is the enemy of done is my favorite saying on the matter.
Say that again?
Perfect is the enemy of done.
Well, it is a huge superscript for self-defeat is what it is, because it's impossible anyway. So why are we doing this to ourselves? Why can't we shoot for being really good or excellent or good enough and then move on to the next instead of getting yanked into sort of that distracted hotspot zone, which I talk about a lot, getting sucked into distraction all the time, frustrations, worries, fuss time. We've got to limit the fuss time and move on to what we're doing more often.
Yeah.
We get too stuck in our feelings and we need to shift on over.
Yeah. So on that
Funny
note,
for a psychologist to say, right?
Yeah.
Right, on feelings. That is kind of funny, but I could agree. I think on one hand, it's good that we've moved forward in our society, like be more in touch again with mental health and feelings, but also like letting your feelings decide. I don't know if you're familiar with Mel Robbins and her 5-second rule. It's just it's like you just decide, like if you give yourself time to think about it and how do I feel about getting out of bed with the 5 a.m. alarm, like you're going to talk yourself out of it. You have a lot of reasons not to do the thing you need to do.
Yeah.
But if it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. No thought. You just like, this is the right thing, right?
It's kind of, you said that, that reminds me of cliff jumping. I don't know if you've ever been cliff jumping.
On a very small scale, but it is very much I've had to count down each time.
It's just like, all right, okay, I'm just going. And you don't even think about it, which, might not be the greatest thing. But that being said,
we could tweak that a little bit, but it worked. That's fine for me.
Yeah, great. So let's talk about the specific strategies. So you're talking about you're in this state of kind of turmoil. You're kind of in the state of clutterness. How do you go from that state of mind to a more clear, actionable state?
Okay, sure. And I want to back up a bit and just drop on you a couple of myths, or one myth in particular that I like people to think about, because they always think they need this one thing to be successful. And people talk about confidence all the time, whether it's in my office, at a dinner party. I'm sure you talk to people and hear these conversations all the time about how you must have confidence if you're going to be able to perform well. And I say it is overrated. You might want to feel confident, but you don't need it. Confidence is all about how you feel. It really is just your belief in getting something done or getting a result, whereas performing well is all about what you do. So I'm always trying to get people to not get too worked up over how confident they are or not confident they are, and move on over to the task at hand. And what do I normally do in this situation that's going to allow me to be successful? Okay, let's go. So that's a huge thing that gets in so many people's way. And I'll just tell you an example. I was working with a client. She was an American Idol contestant.
Oh, wow.
And she, went through the first audition, got her golden ticket, Katy Perry, Lionel Richie, woohoo. I thought she'd be so excited. When I got the call, she was beside herself. I'm not confident. I'm in over my head. They're so much more confident than I am. The other people I'm up against, there's no way I can do this if I'm not confident. And I managed to stop her and say, well, wait a minute. Didn't you just do it? You weren't confident at all, but you just did it. Oh, well, I do have a really good voice. And all I had to do was make sure that I just stayed connected to the song and stayed on top of my high notes. And then I was okay. So she shifted unknowingly from all this feeling when she got onto what she was doing. Golden ticket.
Yeah.
So
wow.
I just like to help people think about confidence. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. That reminds me, it makes me think, it seems like that when we have a specific feeling or a specific state of mind that we're trying to pursue, that's where a lot of issues come up. And it's very much like if you want to be happy, you can't like necessarily pursue the state of happiness. You have to allow that to ensue, or like a state of peace. When you're meditating, if you're constantly thinking, I want a clear mind, that thought continues to just come in and like clutter the space, rather than just allowing yourself to do the thing that will then cause this feeling state to then ensue. Is that kind of what you're?
Yes, that absolutely. I do think though that people do worry too much about future, about the result, about what could happen, what might happen, which never does happen. It's just we come up with all these different thoughts that could get in the way. And we're not using our time wisely to pursue the things we should be pursuing or how we should be doing them.
Yeah.
So back to that process, so that you guys are talking about, it is really important if you want results or to be better at any kind of task or interaction or what have you. It is important to figure out what gets in the way. I mean, it's wonderful to know where you thrive. Maybe you're a very patient person and you listen well, so you connect well. That's great. If so, keep it up. But it's also very important to figure out, okay, what gets in my way here? Am I always worrying about results? Am I worried about making mistakes? Am I protecting myself and holding back because I don't want anyone to think I can't do it? These types of things. You've got to figure out what those hot spots are and those distractions are first. That's number one. Can't go anywhere if you don't do that. You got to face your fears.
That makes so much sense to me, and I think it's a step that's easily overlooked. I feel like it's something that's come up in a lot of conversations that we've had on the podcast, which is really about the first step of self-awareness. Because if you don't know what your roadblocks are, how do you know how to take them down?
Or what your strengths are.
Or how are you going to map where you're going if you can't know where you are? If you're like lost somewhere and you're trying to map a location, if your GPS isn't connecting to the internet and can't even tell you where you are, you're SOL on getting directions to the place you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
True. But what I find too with my practice, that most people know the top 2 or 3 things that bug them. If they really take a moment and think about it, or look at, if I have to like slide a list over to show them what the top ones are. Oh yes, tick, 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 tick. It's most of the time we're kind of pushing them away and trying to avoid dealing with them, as opposed to just being honest and getting to it. But I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that rings true or not?
I think it totally rings true.
I think my thought process is, when you said that, the first thought that came to my mind is the fact that as human beings, we are wired to see the negative. Like we are wired to, because of our evolution, from an evolutionary standpoint, like there's tigers chasing us and there's bears chasing us and there's lions chasing us. Oh my, right? Sorry, I had to get that in.
Yeah, all right.
But we're constantly looking for a source of food, and we're hungry, and all these things. It's like we're built to think about all these negative things, and so and especially like the phrase like you're your own worst critic, like that also rings true, because you know yourself better than anybody, and so okay, what am I allowing myself to slip up on? What am I allowing myself to do X, Y, and Z? So I think that yes, absolutely, like we are all very aware of the things that bother us.
I don't know. I would tend to kind of disagree with you a little bit, because I think that we're expert liars to ourselves.
That too. I mean, that could
I think to a degree, I think in a way we are fashioned to like naturally see the negative, and but I think while simultaneously I might be like, I'm not performing well, I'm not doing enough, I'm not getting my to-do list done, like I'm seeing the negative, but I'm probably not always taking the time to really look clearly or be honest with myself in what is keeping me in that state. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's partially, about, keeping our ego intact, and it is a self-preservation, and, it's a very natural, normal part of being human. But I just also think it takes intentionality and reading a book, like dial in to like learn how to like check yourself before you wreck yourself some more,
Actually, I like that. That's actually very true.
Yeah.
And, it depends on your performance style as well. Some people are just naturally more anxious than negative, whereas other people are naturally more big picture and can take risks, etc. It depends on how you're built. And you're not necessarily going to change your personality, but by invoking certain new habits and behaviors, you can certainly change how you behave in a particular situation or event or relationship that can make things better. So
How
it depends
important
on how you build.
how important would you say positive thinking is? Like, I've been seeing a lot more. I mean, it's always been out there, but one
Or
of my best
positive
friends,
self-talk.
yeah, one of my best friends has sent me a couple of Tony Robbins YouTubes lately, which I've, Tony Robbins, and there's a lot of great stuff in that he's done for years and years. But it just so happened that this one interview that I listened to with a comedian, and now I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. But
It wasn't Tom Segura?
no, but it was the guy with the mullet, and he's
Theo Vaughn.
Theo Vaughn,
Yep,
that's the one.
Yeah.
Blown away. I was blown away by this interview because it was like in real time. Tony was walking Theo Vaughn through these things. But anyway, it got me thinking on a track again of like the power of positive thinking and the power of shaping your mind and what comes out of that. So I'm curious, Dana, what you would say, like how important is the our thought track and what we're telling ourselves every day?
I do think the internal chatter is very important, but it doesn't have to be positive. I'm not worried about if it's positive or not. That's great if it is.
Interesting.
If it's constructive, I'm happy. And sometimes if it's negative, that's giving us good information too.
Okay.
If you're criticizing yourself unnecessarily or it's not real, it's made up, forget it, we've got to change it. But sometimes when it's positive, it's not real either, and that's not all that helpful.
Oh, interesting.
So we kind of just had I'm glad that we had like that slight disagreement because it made me change how I was thinking about this.
Yes, I love changing people's minds.
and
It's what I live for every day. I'm just kidding.
and Dana, I think that the point that you bring up too is that we are all built very differently. Like there are people that are more anxious, and there are people that are more grandiose, I guess could be a good word for it, or more self-aggrandizing. And that really, it sounds like the point that you're making is it doesn't matter so much what the self-talk is, because the self-talk of the anxious person might be overly anxious, and the self-talk of the self-aggrandizing person might be lying to themselves. But really, it sounds like what you're really the most interested in is making sure that our self-talk reflects the reality of the situation, right? That essentially, if we need to improve, being able to recognize that and tell ourselves internally, or if we did something that was actually a really good job, being able to be like, I really nailed that, and being able to address and acknowledge the reality that surrounds us.
Yes, I think that's probably well said. I do feel that there are two parts to one's self-talk, we'll call it. I think people should really try to talk their way through things more productively. And that means you have to pre-plan it a little bit. I mean, and mentioning the accomplishments, I think it's extremely important to have a list to call on that are facts of your own accomplishments, great feedback you've received, whether it's promotions or good behaviors or kindness or whatever. Have that list out there for yourself. So when you start getting negative and thinking, oh no, I'm no good, I can't do this, you can look at that facts list and say, oh, come on, you're being ridiculous. Here's what really is the reality. Stick with it. I mean, it's a way to help ground you back into, what's real. Stop making it up.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about some of the other tools. So if someone is bogged down, now we have this tool that is, essentially make a list. And, would you say that it's important to actually write it down, or is it okay just to have a mental list?
Write it down.
Write it down. So write it down, and you can remember it later. But if you have a written down list, to me, that sounds kind of like a resume.
I want other things than just a resume. It's not just a promotion or your salary or whatever. It's things you feel good about, whether it's work or life or anything.
Somebody paid you a compliment that made you feel really warm and seen and heard, and you're like, oh wow, I really feels amazing for someone to notice that I'm really good at that, because I felt like I was good at that. And that's a good point, because I think, for example, I hate, my year-end reviews at work, because there's always this section that's like, please detail the things that you've done and accomplished and contributed. And I have the worst time I'm like, man, I know I did stuff that was valuable and important,
Yeah.
And I can't recall it because all I can think about is all of the things that I missed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's getting in the way of me performing at a high level and being dialed in.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I think of the term dialed in. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I feel like there's so many ways, so many different avenues that this can go into. One of the things of being dialed in, it reminds me of like what's called a flow state, where it's like you're just in the flow of it. And there's lots of books, lots of people that have talked about this, but essentially where it's like you lose track of time because you're just in it and you're just really dialed in. You're just doing the thing that you love, and you're just, it's right on the edge of where your capabilities are. But it's difficult enough that you're being stretched, but not so difficult that you can't accomplish it, or that you're able to accomplish it 80% of the time. And occasionally you get like this 20% space where you have to figure something out, but you're capable of doing that. Can you talk a little bit more about the flow state?
Well, and is that like what because I know there's a note here about you talking about the zone in your book. And would you say that's like similar to what Derek's describing about like flow state?
Hey, I hope you're enjoying today's podcast. I just wanted to take a quick break because if you're listening, you probably know what we do here at Invigor Medical Podcast, but maybe not what we do at invigormedical.com. So let me introduce us. At Invigor, we provide prescription strength treatments and peptides for weight loss, sexual health, and lifestyle optimization. Every treatment plan is carefully prescribed by licensed doctors and sourced from legitimate pharmacies. You don't ever need to buy questionable research chemicals again. And bonus, as a podcast listener, you get a 10% discount on your first treatment plan with code podcast10 at invigormedical.com. Now, let's get back to today's episode.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same type of thing. And really what I mean by it is it's that place and time where you're calmish. You don't have to be super calm.
Zen
Calmish.
Buddha.
You're clear mentally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that allows you to stay focused on the critical factors in the moment, right? So if you are, let's just say, playing tennis, there's a lot of things going on. But you don't have to pay attention to all of them because half of them you do automatically anyway.
Sure.
But there might be one or two things that, you do have to pay attention to get the result that you want, whether it's to do with a certain shot or a certain tactic. And you do have to actually think your way through your match or talk your way through your match. Now, this flow zone state, that perfect state that Derek's talking about, that just sometimes happens. And when that's happening, I tell my clients, bye, have fun, see ya. Don't worry about a thing, just carry on. But I also tell them, you have to be ready for when it starts to go sideways, or it doesn't just show up. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to make that happen as best you can, as opposed to just, well, it didn't happen today, I guess that's the way it is. Mm. We're in control of more of it than we think. And it's not as hard as we think it is to do.
A concept that comes into my mind with this is this idea of muscle memory, right? And tied to that is this idea of doing something slow, repetitively until you can do it fast, and at that point it kind of becomes ingrained, and you're able to do it without necessarily thinking about it. What role would you say? Like,
oh, she said accept.
Accept
when the pressure's on.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well,
that's what I'm talking about, is when the pressure's on, because we all have our pressure moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can't even remember what book this was. I think it was The Fighter's Mind by Sam Sheridan. He talked about this concept. He basically, the concept of the book is that he went around and followed a whole bunch of different practitioners of different martial arts and kind of figured out. He has two books, one about the heart, one about the mind, and really tried to think about, like, how do people think about high stress situations and how they perform when they're competing in these very violent, very high pressure competitions. And he actually talked about, I think, police officers that are able to react so quickly, like just on a dime. It's a like life or death situation, and the response that the police officer would say is essentially like, I've practiced that so many times that when it came in that moment, I was able to do the split reaction within a fraction of a second. So how do you balance that with this idea of, like, is it just a number of repetitions, or is it number of repetition under pressure that really help you get there?
Well, it really does depend. I mean, there's the skill part of it. There's
Yeah.
the talent, and okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm a heart surgeon, and I know what the protocols are. I know what the systems are. I know what I have to do in these moments. Okay, well, when something critical happens, when there's a crisis, some people, if they're not expecting it, or if they just aren't handling it as well, or it is just a real crisis moment, they aren't necessarily automatically going to just do it. They actually have to think their way through it.
Mm.
They have to calm themselves. They have to zone into the most critical factors. They've practiced it, but their mindset is allowing them to get to their skill set. So it's not just about, 10,000 hours
Yeah.
and I'll be able to do it no matter what. We all know that from day to day, our mindset can change and our mental approach can change. Our talents are still there. It's how we utilize them depending on the day and how we're feeling and just what's happening.
Yeah.
So I'm always pushing the mindset. You better know what to do if something
If that
happens,
happens.
or if you're just not ready.
Yeah. That makes me think of a book that I read a while ago called The Talent Code. I can't remember who it's by, but it talks about how, just like you said, the 10,000 hour method 10,000 hours doesn't seem to be a magic number. Obviously, if you do something for 10,000 hours, you're probably got a decent amount of competency in it. But
Maybe.
that really, hopefully, if you've spent 10,000 hours on something, hopefully you have a competency in it. But one of the things he talks about is how to actually develop talent includes like a passion for it, right? You have to be able to be driven to come back to it again and again. And then either expert practice or expert guidance from like a coach who can have an outside view. And, because an hour of practice with a coach that's telling you, hey, work on X, Y, and Z is like 10 times more effective than doing an hour of practice by yourself.
Should be, but it depends on the coach too.
Sure,
I've
sure.
seen a lot go on there too. And you might be able to do in 5,000 hours what it took me 10,000 hours to do, right?
Yeah. Hey, some of that, I'm guessing, probably kind of falls back to like our proclivities of like what we are actually naturally gifted at, or what we more naturally are attuned to, I guess you could say.
Okay, I'm going to jump in on that one with the passion comment.
Yeah.
Well, which is always very interesting to me, because in terms of passion, I never worry about people being passionate, or you have to have passion to reach your goal or to be good at anything. I think a lot of times people just start to get good at something, so they like it.
Yeah.
Is it passion? I don't know. I don't think it's a given that you have to have. If you do, great. But I think a lot of people maybe misread passion as, they happen to get really good at something, so they're going to love it. So let's go. Let's get even better at it.
That's interesting. I think there are probably people that like discover they're passionate about something as they learn to do it and realize they're good at it.
Yes.
Passion comes after.
Yeah.
I mean, if you would have told me 5-10 years ago that I would be passionate about doing a podcast, I'd be like, well, that's interesting. I don't see that. Like now that I'm like doing a podcast, it's something I'm incredibly passionate about and brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
And I think I'm really good. I'm just kidding. Anyway, moving on to the next question. Okay, so because I actually am, some of these questions are really good, and I usually don't even really look at them, but I feel like I could go on so many different tangents with your expertise in your book that I want to like come back to this a little bit. And I was looking at one here. We kind of touched on this one a little bit, that you stress the idea that perfection is the enemy of progress. And so we already dived into that a little bit. So I wanted to do, how can someone recognize and develop routines that truly enhance their performance? We just talked a bit about like, writing down a list of things that are like getting in your way. But what would be the next step in helping develop routines to enhance performance?
Okay, well, I've skipped a step, so I'm going to throw something in the middle there. Once you figure out what does mess you up and gets in the way, there are 4 skills to pick from that actually help, they're strategies that help you do a good job in the moment. And one of them is being able to stay calm, right? Another one is picking out those mental cues for the task that you're going to embark on, more on it could be on a technical side or a tactical side. What do I need to do here to perform well? Then there's the talking your way through it. Then there's some mental rehearsal. Then you're ready to get a routine.
Okay.
So you've got sort of a blueprint of a number of strategies that you think work for you. And again, there are all kind of samples laid out. And then you sort of pick, okay, when I have a presentation, when I have to go into a big meeting and negotiate a deal, when I have to take an exam or talk to a tough, difficult person, what's my routine? What's my plan? Same type of thing. And that should be small enough to fit on a sticky note.
Okay.
No bigger. So in preparation for that event, you want to get ready. You need to warm up. You need to maybe go over your facts list. Maybe you need to breathe a little. Maybe you need to rehearse, see yourself being calm and competent, or, speaking clearly and articulately, whatever it is. And that's what you do to warm up. Then you pick one or two things that in the moment you're going to do. If you start to go a little sideways or if you're not in the zone. And then out of all of that, that's basically a routine. You've picked out the things that if you do, you feel prepared, you feel at least a little bit more relaxed and ready to be clear in the moment. That's it.
And so essentially you just repeat that. Like or it sounds like essentially there's a pre-performance stage that you're talking about, and this is very clear in like sports. Is you have the time before the actual event or the the race or the meet or anything like that along those lines, where you're able to kind of prepare yourself. And it seems like there's that list of saying, write down the list of things, kind of review them, kind of go over some of the critical information, whether that's something specifically that you need to do through visualization, and maybe that's something we can talk about. I'm very interested in that. Or something that is very critical for you to know and to have that fact like ingrained in your mind before you go in. So there seems to be kind of like this preparatory phase, and then when you're actually in it, basically having a set plan of like, okay, if things fall apart, I know I can always return back to this base point.
That's essentially it. And that is a form of routine that I think is very helpful, because I think a lot of times people think a routine, I have to do this in order to perform well, as in, okay, golf. People are big on routines in golf. I have to, set up this way. I have to look at here. Now, there could be a list of 10 things to do, and they might be germane to what you're, the fairway you're on and what you have to do. But there's only going to be a couple of critical things that you need to pay attention to. And I guess what I'm trying to get people away from is, I have to do it this way, otherwise I can't start. Yeah. Whereas you have to, as long as you're connected to the main things in your routine, you're fine. And I like people to shorten it, because it's very difficult to have a long routine and then expect a good result.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And really to have that come off more like almost like a nervous tick, where like if before I can do this, I have to like pop my knuckles, and then I have to clap 3 times, then I have to like slap my knee, like if you have to do that every single time to reset, people are like, man, this guy's crazy. Right. And so
those are more like superstitions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it sounds like you aren't necessarily for those. You're kind of like, okay, you're doing that for a specific reason, to get to what result. Really, you're trying to get to a state of mind where you're clear and where you're not necessarily confident, but you know that you are competent to complete this task.
Well, and maybe you could differentiate a bit for us between beneficial routines and unhelpful superstitions.
Yeah.
Of course. So superstitions, we all know about them. We all maybe have a few, but my lucky socks, I can't perform well unless I wear the same shirt or eat the same thing. There's
My
so many
team won when I wore this color, and so I have to wear this color the next time they play, or they won't win.
Yeah.
for sure. So all that can be fun and whatnot, but if it's starting to interfere is when, it's really, superstitions are just a way of dealing with our anxieties. It's the tension that's bubbling up before an event or a situation that we're trying to deal with. So we like to do these, tick off the box of these things, but they're not very constructive.
Right.
So I'm always trying to get people to, stop worrying about, their lucky earrings or their lucky hat, and get over onto some constructive strategies that might actually help them when they're scared, when they're not sure, when they've drifted back into the zone of worries and frustrations and self-criticisms. We need to, shift over onto something helpful, because your earrings aren't going to do it. I was
Right.
talking to a Instagram host the other day, and she was laughing about her lucky earrings. So
So what would be an example of that? And maybe we could like bring it down to even to, really basic performative or performance within a day. Like say, I'm halfway through my work day, and the school just called because my kid is sick, and now I've got to figure out if I'm leaving work or if I'm calling, a sitter or a family member to pick up my kid from school, and I've got this big meeting in the, and it just, everything starts to just fall apart in my brain. What would be
yes.
a real example of, this is, I mean, obviously you don't know my own tools, but let's abstract here. Keep getting myself back in the moment rather than completely falling off track, if that makes sense.
Well, in that situation, clearly your tension will have shot up, right? So you might be a 9 or 10 on the scale instead of the normal 3 or 4. So when our tension is high, what happens to us physically? Okay, heart rate, tension, etc.
Yeah.
Tight muscles, can't move. And then what happens to our brains? Clutter. We jump right back into all the things that could go wrong, and all the worries and what's not going to go right, etc. So we go right back into those derailers, and we can't function very clearly.
Yeah.
So what's the first thing you do? You got to get calm. How are you going to get calm? Well, guess what? Sounds funny, but breathing properly is the first thing. And it is the best thing that anyone can do for themselves in any kind of critical moment. So that's number one. Now, just as an offshoot, I deal with a lot of people in the NFL and NHL and all of that. And I talked to like 4 guys last week who were laughing about how breathing was saving their games, like
Wow.
for the playoffs. One guy in the playoffs, other guy's not. But it's like they had to actually keep breathing during the game
Yeah.
so they could get to what they were supposed to be doing, because there was so much going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bet.
So it's the same thing for all of us. We're all performers, right? So in your situation, what are you going to do? I bet you if you calm down and settle, it's a lot easier for you to talk your way through what you're going to do.
And the pieces
Step
just
one.
kind of fall into place. Yeah.
And so step 1's breathing. What's step 2?
Well, step 2 is those mental cues, those performance cues. Okay, do I call someone? Who do I call? Like getting those sort of task-related things set. Then you're going to talk. Then you're going to talk to yourself, talk your way through it. Keep talking your way down, talking your way calm. Depends on what's bothering you or what you're really worried about. But being able to get calm is probably all you really need to get to, okay, here's the progression of things I need to do
Yeah.
in this particular case.
Yeah.
Because you handle that all the time, right?
More than I'd like to, I'll be honest.
But on your good days, you're calmer than on your days that it's feeling a lot more chaotic.
And they're constantly in a reactive state
Yes,
is what that feels
rushing,
like.
rushing.
And I think that's a big thing for me is like once I kind of get in a reactive state, then I feel like I stay in a reactive state for the rest of the day, which is not helpful.
No, but so many people are built that way, just fast-paced people, which is great because it helps you get things done and push forward. But in other situations, people end up rushing or get frustrated or defensive or even snippy and can't think. And all they have to do is learn to, maybe for those people, they've got to learn how to slow down just a little bit. Boom, right now, like in 5 seconds, I've got to slow down and settle for a moment. Because owning the ability to self-soothe is a huge skill in performance.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that I wanted it to be like this big, like, hey, you got to do all these things and da 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 da, here's 10 things. Like the fact that you're like, hey, you need to calm yourself down. Like just
Because you
get back
do all
to,
those things naturally anyway,
right.
once you've calmed down.
Right. And it sounds like, too, having done the prep work beforehand, like you said, like making those lists will help, too. Because then it's like once I've calmed myself down, now I've already done the work to know what it is that I need to be focused on and where I need to be in order to get dialed in again.
Yes, because your first step was knowing what's going to trip you up.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I rush under pressure. Okay, well, when I do, this is what I'm going to do. Oh, all right.
And I feel like that really ties into this idea of visualization, of being able to like, the main person that I kind of like first learned about visualization from is Stephen Covey. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. When I was, a teenager, I read that multiple times.
Good.
And one of the things he talked about is if you visualize yourself in a situation, in fact, he talked about a practice that he did with his son when he was like trying to practice some sort of football thing. And what would happen is that the son would visualize himself panicking in a situation. And he's like, well, if you're visualizing yourself panicking in a situation, then when you get to that situation, you're going to be panicking. And so he's like, being able to visualize very calm, and have it very vivid can actually make a very profound effect. I don't know. Can you talk about some more visualization techniques?
Absolutely. So visualization, imagery, there's so much good research out there. But I think it often makes people think that they have to spend an hour a day or they have to, constantly be working on their mental rehearsal. And I like to talk about it in terms of daydreaming. We all daydream anyway. Why don't you just focus your daydreaming a little bit more? So like 3 times a day, doing a 15-second clip in your head of rehearsing something will actually make a difference. And it's not daunting. So I like to talk about it in terms of daydreaming because, it's not something special you have to sit down and do. Just harness it a little bit more during your day.
Yeah.
Now you can use mental rehearsal for all sorts of things. For being just learning how to chill out and seeing yourself doing that, for being better at a skill, for improving a particular skill, or speaking up in a meeting, or whatever it is that you want to do. Maybe you need to visualize fighting back more. If something goes wrong, how to correct it in your mind. Don't just stop and think, oh no, I'm panicking. Just keep going and do something fantastic in your mind that makes it palatable or right.
Yeah.
And then the other type of daydreaming I like is step up daydreaming. See yourself somewhere you want to be. Maybe you're not there yet in terms of your abilities or your performance, but step out, go big, start seeing that in your head too.
And that kind of really helps you imagine, like, what are the steps I would have to take to be able to get there? And you might start visualizing, like if you want this amazing physique, it's like, okay, I want this amazing physique. And then you're like, well, how do I get that? Oh, I have to go to the gym. And then all of a sudden you start visualizing yourself going to the gym. Makes it more likely that you're actually going to do that.
Yep, absolutely.
As you were talking about that, I was thinking about, because like, I feel like I daydream quite a bit. I think about a lot of different possibilities and a lot of different things. One thing that I realized where I think I do this is when I'm like listening to educational material, or I'm looking at something of like, how can I specifically work on this one thing? Like as the person's talking, I think about, okay, how would I actually do that in this specific situation? There's this one weightlifting channel that I follow, and they talk about all these very specific techniques, and as they're talking about it, I'm like, can I visualize myself actually doing that thing and imagine how it would feel? And then when I actually go to the gym, it feels great because it's like, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be like, and being able to really attain those results feels awesome.
All I can say is way to go. Keep it up.
Maybe I just need to visualize myself popping out of bed at 5 a.m. with like Cinderella status, like singing to the animals in nature, and like the world is coming alive and I'm full of joy and wonder. And maybe that's all I need is to visualize my wake up calls like that.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome.
Oh my gosh, I feel like there's so much that we could continue talking about with you. And I really appreciate all of the time and the insight that you've offered to us. Where can people find your book?
Any bookseller, Amazon, and Barnes & Noble, anywhere, or drdanissinclair.com.
That's what I was going to say. Where can they find you? So that's your website. Are you also on socials?
Yep, Dr. Dana Sinclair.
That's amazing. Did you have any other questions you wanted to follow up with, Derek?
No, I mean, I could go down the rabbit hole.
I know.
But, I just wanted to, like Natalie, express my appreciation for you joining us on the show. And really, I think that the work that you're doing is so specific and so dialed in, you could say. And I really think that it's very powerful, and I think it's a good conversation. I think that all your listeners will truly enjoy the conversation we had today. So
I agree.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And if I may, just want to remind people that it does take courage to try to be good, but give it a go. It's not as hard as one thinks.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic advice.
I think it is. It's very timely. I have too. I know that people, still being in the first part of the year and probably starting to hit that wall a bit on their resolutions and all of these improvements. You usually need something to kind of help keep you going. And I think this is going to be really timely for our listeners to be able to pick up the book and listen to these insights from Dr. Sinclair and figure out how to get dialed in and perform at their best.
Thanks for tuning in to the Invigor Medical Podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode, you can support us by liking and subscribing.
Your feedback matters, so feel free to share questions or future episode ideas in the comment section.
For more information about our prescription strength treatments for weight loss, ED, and overall wellness, all from qualified doctors and reputable pharmacies, visit us at invigormedical.com. And don't forget to use code podcast10 for a 10% discount on your first treatment plan. Until next time, stay well.